Smash that like button like it owes you money. Subscribe like you're trying to disappear into witness protection, and comment below, lockdown, if you want the full story, because what happened on this transfer route is the kind of nightmare even hardened cops don't talk about twice. The first siren screamed at 2:17 a.m. on Highway 101, just north of the Marin County line. A prison transport bus, black windows, a steel cage, and an armed escort, was fishtailing across the wet asphalt. It was like something had grabbed it from underneath and just yanked. A CHP cruiser slammed its brakes right behind it, tires shrieking, the dashcam shaking violently. In the flashing red and blue light, the bus looked less like a vehicle and more like a moving coffin. Then it hit the guardrail. Metal screamed. Glass burst. The bus tipped sideways, grinding a shower of sparks across the highway. One of the escort SUVs swerved to avoid it, but it was too late. It clipped the bus, rolled twice, and landed upside down like a crushed beetle. And in the middle of all that chaos, someone ran. Not away from the crash. Toward it. By the time officers finally reached the bus door, the scene didn't make any sense. The inmates were still inside, chained in pairs, coughing and bleeding. The driver was slumped over the wheel, eyes wide open, his throat a raw red line. The armed transport officer in the front seat was alive, but his hands were zip-tied behind him. It was done calmly, carefully, as if someone had all the time in the world. And the manifest, the official list of everyone on board, was missing. Detective Elena Marr, an internal affairs liaison for the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, arrived just before sunrise. She stood on the shoulder of the highway, watching the officers bag evidence under the glare of portable floodlights. The rain kept falling, thin and cold, as if the sky was trying to wash the whole night away. On the surface, the case should have been simple. A crash, a botched escape attempt. But the details were all wrong. The bus had been scheduled to move a single high-value inmate, Marcus St. Calder, a San Quentin lifer being transferred to Pelican Bay's Supermax security housing unit. Calder wasn't just another convict. He was a ghost story inside the prison walls, quiet, disciplined, universally respected. The kind of man who could order unimaginable violence without ever raising his voice. Except, Calder was still on the bus, still chained, still staring at everyone with a chilling calm that made your skin itch. Elena looked at him through the broken glass of a window. Calder's eyes met hers. He didn't plead. He didn't rage. He smiled. A small, knowing smile that sent a shiver down her spine. The first real clue was found in the wrecked escort SUV. There was a dead guard in the back seat. But he hadn't died from the crash. He died from a single puncture wound just under the jawline. It was small, surgical, almost delicate. The weapon was gone, but the wound screamed one thing loud and clear. Someone inside this convoy knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't chaos. This was a plan. Back at the temporary command post, Elena demanded the transfer logs. A nervous captain handed her a folder, his fingers trembling slightly. "Everything's in there," he stammered. Elena flipped through the pages, and she froze. Because Marcus Calder wasn't the only name on the manifest. There was another inmate listed, someone who was never, ever supposed to leave San Quentin. Elias Rourke, a former prison transport coordinator who had become an inmate himself. He was a man who had testified in a major corruption case years ago, and then been quietly swallowed by the system, erased. Elena had seen his file once. It was stamped with a warning in bold red letters. "Do not transport. High risk." She looked up, her voice sharp. "Where is Rourke?" The captain's face went pale. He looked like he was about to be sick. We don't have him." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs as she walked back to the wrecked bus. Officers were still cutting chains, pulling inmates out, counting bodies, checking IDs. Then an EMT shouted from inside. "Detective, you need to see this." Elena climbed into the bus, stepping over shattered glass and pools of blood. In the very back, hidden behind the last row of seats, there was a hidden compartment, an improvised wall panel, bolted in place from the inside. They pried it open, and inside was a CDCR uniform, neatly folded and still warm to the touch. A badge, and a handwritten note, soaked but readable. It said, "Pelican Bay won't hold him, but I can." So who was Elias Rourke? And who was the person who helped him disappear? This wasn't an escape. This was something else entirely. A hunt. A ghost had just walked out of a high-security prison transport, And now, he was the one doing the hunting. By sunrise, the story on the news was already wrong. Transport bus crash, they said. Injuries reported. No inmates escaped. A neat, tidy package for the morning commute. But Detective Elena Mars stood under a gray sky, watching the mangled wreck get loaded onto a flatbed, and she felt something colder than the morning rain crawl up her spine. Because she knew the truth. Someone had escaped, and the state was already trying to bury it. Inside the cramped command trailer, the air thick with the smell of wet uniforms and stale coffee, Elena demanded the inmate count again. The numbers refused to add up. San Quentin swore they had released 2 inmates for transfer. The crash scene, however, only produced one. One survivor, sitting on the curb in cuffs, was Marcus St. Calder. He looked less like a man who just survived a violent crash and more like a man who just finished a 5-star meal. Elena knelt in front of him, the gravel digging into her knee. She leaned close, her voice a low growl. "Where's Elias Rourke?" Calder's smile widened, a slow, controlled crack in his otherwise stoic face. "You're asking the wrong question, detective." Elena's jaw tightened. She wasn't in the mood for games. "Then give me the right one." Calder's eyes, dark and intelligent, flicked toward the swarm of officers, the highway patrol, the paramedics, the entire machine scrambling to control the chaos he seemed so separate from. "You should ask," he whispered. The words meant only for her. "How many of them are already his?" Before Elena could even process the chilling implication, a radio on a nearby officer's belt crackled to life. The transmission was frantic. A deputy from a nearby town was calling in an emergency. A gas station on the edge of the highway had just been hit. The clerk was dead. The security camera footage showed a man in a corrections department uniform stepping behind the counter, as calm as a regular shopper. He took the keys from the hook and the cash from the register. And then, just before leaving, he looked straight into the camera. Not a glance. A stare. Like he wanted to be seen. The image was grainy, but it was enough. Elena recognized the face from the old, heavily redacted file, Elias Rourke. The inmate marked, "Do not transport." This wasn't a panicked escape. This was a man with a plan, moving with chilling purpose. Elena immediately requested a helicopter, a bird's-eye view to track his movement. But her request vanished into a black hole of bureaucracy. The warden's office wanted silence. The governor's liaison wanted no public fear. Orders started coming down from on high that didn't match the reality on the ground, tying the hands of the very people trying to solve the case. And that's when the horrifying realization dawned on Elena. Rourke wasn't just escaping from the state. He was escaping through it, using its own systems and procedures like a roadmap. A call came in from San Quentin, confirming her fears. A staff member had been found in a storage room, zip-tied and unconscious. When they checked the security logs, they found a ghost in the machine. Doors opening with authorized access codes at impossible hours, for weeks leading up to the crash. Someone on the inside had been methodically preparing this escape. Elena got in her car and drove north, chasing shadows. Rourke was leaving a trail, but it wasn't one of chaos. It was a trail of messages. At a motel, a clerk found a note under a pillow where he'd stayed. "The system moves bodies. I move truth." A stolen car, abandoned near the coast, had another note tucked into the glove box. Calder was never the target. That one hit Elena like a physical blow. Marcus Calder, the notorious lifer, the prison kingmaker, was supposed to be the monster in this story. The man so dangerous he needed to be shipped to the fortress of Pelican Bay like a piece of toxic waste. But he wasn't the target. He was a distraction, a human smokescreen. Elena finally managed to cut through the red tape and get permission to see Calder one more time before he was rerouted to a different facility. She found him in a sterile holding cell, sitting perfectly upright on the metal cot, his hands folded in his lap like a man patiently waiting for a church service to begin. "You helped him," Elena said, stating it as a fact. Calder didn't deny it. "I didn't help him escape," he corrected her softly. "I helped him transfer." Elena's blood ran hot with frustration. Why? Why would you help a man like Rourke? For the first time, Calder's eyes sharpened with an intense focus. Because Rourke knows where the bodies are buried. And detective, he leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I don't mean that metaphorically." Elena felt her throat tighten. Calder continued. "You think Pelican Bay is where men disappear?" "No. Pelican Bay is where they're stored. Elena left the facility, her mind reeling, her hands shaking. As she got back to her car, her phone buzzed. A blocked number. It was a text message with a photo attachment. With a sense of dread, she opened it. Her stomach dropped. It was a picture of Elias Rourke. He was standing outside a foggy, barbed wire perimeter fence. Behind him, barely visible in the dense mist, was a sign, Pelican Bay State Prison. And Rourke was holding something up to the camera, a CDCR employee badge, with Elena Marr's name on it. A second text came through a moment later. If you want the truth, detective, you're already on the transfer list. 3 months later, the state officially closed the case. Elias Rourke was presumed dead. The bus crash was ruled an unfortunate accident. Marcus Calder was securely housed in a maximum security facility. A neat story, all loose ends tied up. But Elena knew better. Because every single night, at exactly 2:17 a.m., her phone lights up with a notification from an unknown number. There's never a message. Just one thing. A location pin. And it's always pointing north, toward Pelican Bay. And if you think this story was intense, you're not ready for what happens next. Hit that subscribe button because you don't want to miss it.